Mike Tyson is the most feared man alive. Not feared the way politicians are feared. Not feared the way powerful men in expensive suits are feared. Feared the way a force of nature is feared. In 1988, Mike Tyson is the unified heavyweight champion of the world. He has knocked out 33 men. He has ended careers in 91 seconds. He has made arenas full of people hold their breath just watching him walk to the ring. The whole world is scared of Mike Tyson. One man is not. One man, a cocaine kingpin from East Harlem who is already connected to multiple murders, looks at the most feared boxer on the planet and thinks about shooting him. In Alpo Martinez's own recorded words, he almost did it. That night, the specific night that Alpo admitted he had Mike Tyson in his sights, is a story that changes the history of boxing, of New York streets, and of every person connected to both worlds. Because to understand that night, you need to understand one thing first. Alpo didn't just almost kill Mike Tyson out of nowhere. He had already killed almost everyone Tyson loved. This is that story. Michael Gerard Tyson grew up in Brownsville, Brooklyn, not the Brownsville of today. The Brownsville of the 1970s, one of the most violent neighborhoods in the most violent city in America. A place where children learned early that the world outside their block was hostile, and the world on their block was not much safer. Tyson was small as a child, soft-spoken, the kind of boy who got picked on, who got his pigeons stolen, who cried in the street, who did not look like anything that would ever be feared by anyone. Then, Customado found him, and everything changed. By 1985, Tyson is fighting professionally. By 1986, he is the WBC heavyweight champion. By 1987, he has unified all three major heavyweight titles. 20 years old, the youngest heavyweight champion in the history of boxing. And despite all of it, despite the mansions and the entourage and the global fame and the millions, Tyson never stopped being from Brooklyn. He never stopped moving through the same world he came from. He never stopped keeping company with the men he grew up around. Because Brooklyn was always where he was understood. In Brooklyn, he did not have to be the heavyweight champion. He could just be Mike. And the men he trusted most, the men he brought closest to him, were the men who had known him before any of it, the men from his neighborhood, the men from his world. One of those men was Demencio Benson, Demencio Montana. Benson was everything Tyson wasn't in public. Where Tyson was explosive and unpredictable, Montana was smooth, calculated, the kind of man the streets described as a pretty boy who also put in work, handsome enough to have any woman in any room, dangerous enough that men who knew better gave him space. He was from Weeksville, Crown Heights, Brooklyn. A Brooklyn Don in the specific way that era produced them, not through organizational hierarchy, but through personal magnetism and genuine respect earned on the streets. He ran with a circle that reads like a who's who of that era's New York underground. Haitian Jack, the controversial Brooklyn figure, later connected to Tupac Shakur's 1994 rape case, a man whose name alone carried weight across multiple boroughs. Darryl Baum, the streets called him Homicide, Homo. Mike Tyson's best friend from childhood. The man who would eventually become Tyson's bodyguard in the late 90s. The man whose death would trigger the most emotional public breakdown of Tyson's life. At the center of this Brooklyn world, Mike Tyson himself. They were photographed together in 1990. Montana, Tyson, Haitian Jack, and Puerto Rican Jesus, all in the same frame in Brooklyn. All of them connected through the specific geography of a borough that produces men who stay loyal to each other across decades, because Brooklyn demands that kind of loyalty. Montana was also dating a woman named Cindy, a close friend of Jackie Rowe, Mike Tyson's sister. The connection ran to the bone. When Montana eventually moved his operation to Washington, D.C., when he migrated south to expand his hustle into territory that was generating serious money, he brought all of that Brooklyn loyalty with him. He just didn't know who was waiting for him in D.C. Alberto Martinez was born June 8, 1966, in East Harlem's East River houses. He started selling drugs as a teenager with the specific ambition of a young man who had looked at legitimate opportunity in East Harlem and decided it wasn't moving fast enough. He was extraordinary at the game, not because of violence first, but because of charisma. Alpo was the man who could walk into a club without a dollar and leave with the most attractive woman in the room, fly without money, magnetic without resources, the kind of personality that made people orbit him before he had anything to offer. When the cocaine money came, the magnetism multiplied. By the mid-1980s, Alpo was operating out of Harlem alongside two men whose names would become inseparable from his. Ozzie Faison, the careful one, the businessman, and Richard Porter, Rich Porter, the man who was supposed to be his brother. Rich was Harlem's favorite son, born July 26, 1965. He owned over a dozen luxury vehicles kept in a Manhattan garage. He never wore the same outfit twice. He was the living embodiment of what the crack era could do for a young black man from Harlem. The flash, the respect, the specific street fame that the neighborhood amplified to impossible levels. Alpo and Rich built their cocaine operation together. Partners, brothers, the kind of friendship that the streets produce when two men trust each other completely and make each other rich simultaneously. But inside that partnership, a fracture was growing. December 5, 1989, Rich Porter's 12-year-old brother, Don L., was kidnapped in Harlem on his way to school. The kidnappers cut off the boy's finger. They demanded $500,000 in ransom. Rich went to Alpo, his partner, his brother, the man who was supposed to help him solve this. Something happened between them during that conversation. An accusation. Alpo believed Rich had been holding back money from their operation, skimming from the partnership that was supposed to be equal. Rich denied it. January 3, 1990. Rich Porter was shot multiple times in the head and chest. His body was found near Orchard Beach in the Bronx the next day. Police found $2,239 in his pocket. Donald Porter's body was found in a pile of trash bags later that month. The ransom was never paid. The boy was dead. His brother was dead. Alpo described it himself in words that became infamous. Rich lied to me about something there was no reason to lie about. I gave him the opportunity to tell me the truth not once but twice. He didn't die, so I shot him in the head. It wasn't personal, it was business. Harlem wept. Mike Tyson heard the news. Rich Porter, the flashy Harlem kingpin who moved through the same underground world as Tyson's Brooklyn Circle, was dead, shot by his own partner, and Alpo Martinez, the man who had pulled the trigger, was still moving, still building, now heading south to Washington, D.C., where Montana Benson had gone to expand his operation. In D.C., Alpo found his weapon. Wayne Perry was sitting in a D.C. jail cell when Alpo arrived from New York. The people who were supposed to come with bail money had not come. Alpo came. He put up the money. He walked Perry out. And Perry, who understood loyalty the way that men abandoned in jail cells understand loyalty, decided to pay Alpo back with the only thing he had, his particular skill set. The streets called Perry Silk. D.C. Police Commander Donald Hilbring would eventually describe him as the most dangerous man the department had ever encountered. Not the most wanted, not the most prolific, the most dangerous. The specific quality of Perry's violence was what separated him from other violent men. He did not hesitate. He did not calculate risk in public spaces the way most people do. He moved through crowds, daylight, and surveillance cameras with the calm of someone who had decided that consequences were someone else's problem. With Perry as his enforcer, Alpo moved 30 kilograms of cocaine into D.C. daily. Nobody touched his operation. Nobody touched him. He was untouchable. And then, in this untouchable D.C. world, Montana Benson arrived from Brooklyn. Montana and Alpo moved in overlapping worlds, Brooklyn money, D.C. streets, the same clubs, the same circles, the same women. There is a woman at the center of this story. She had a history with Montana before she became Alpo's main girl. The relationship between Montana and this woman predated Alpo's involvement. When Alpo and she were on breaks, she went back to Montana. It was history. It was complicated. It was the kind of situation that men in that world are supposed to charge to the game and move past. Alpo could not move past it. Word got back to him. Pillow talk, the story that always travels to the person it was never supposed to reach. Alpo heard it. And for a man who had already killed his closest partner over a perceived betrayal, this was a match dropped on dry wood. Montana had to go. The execution, like everything Alpo organized, was cold and precise. He invited Montana to a basketball game in Washington, D.C., a public setting, a social occasion, the kind of casual daytime activity that nobody suspects until it is already over. July 16, 1991. At the basketball game, two of them argued. Words, the kind of confrontation that in a less dangerous context ends with injured pride and men going their separate ways. Alpo gave a signal. Wayne Perry, the most feared man in Washington, D.C., walked up to Demencio Montana Benson and shot him in the head. Montana died at the basketball game, in broad daylight, in public. Alpo later sent flowers and a written apology to the Benson family, a condolence for a murder he had ordered. When the news reached Brooklyn, the reaction told the whole story of what Montana had meant to the people who knew him. But the reaction that mattered most for the next chapter came from Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson found out that Alpo killed Montana, the man in those photographs, the man connected to his own sister through Cindy, the man from his Brooklyn world who had moved to D.C. to build something and was shot in the head at a basketball game over a woman. Tyson was furious in the way that only men who have lost someone genuinely close can be furious. Not the controlled anger of a man calculating his next move, but the raw, consuming fury of a man who has just had someone taken from him who cannot be replaced. And Alpo was not finished, because Montana was not the only person from Tyson's world that Alpo had touched. Rich Porter, the Harlem kingpin who moved through the same underground circuit as Tyson's Brooklyn Circle, was dead on January 3, 1990, killed by Alpo's bullet. Montana, the Brooklyn Don photographed beside Tyson in 1990, was killed on July 16, 1991, by Alpo's signal and Perry's gun. Every phone call Mike Tyson received about a close friend dying was connected to Alpo Martinez. Membersonly documented this precisely. Every time word reached Tyson about someone he cared about, someone he had grown up around, shared photographs with, trusted, Alpo's name was in the same sentence. This pattern is what made the confrontation inevitable. Tyson went after Alpo. What happened next is what nobody tells properly. The confrontation between Mike Tyson and Alpo Martinez happened. That much is verified by multiple sources. By Alpo's own recorded audio. By Ozzy Faison, the most credible surviving witness to everything that occurred in that era, who confirmed it in interview. Alpo had a weapon. And in his own words, in audio that has circulated through YouTube channels and street history archives for years, Alpo Martinez admitted what he was thinking in that moment. He almost shot Mike Tyson, the most famous boxer alive, the most physically feared man on the planet, the man whose face was on television screens across the world every time he entered a ring. Alpo looked at him and seriously considered pulling the trigger. What was running through Alpo's mind in that moment? The street calculation, the specific arithmetic of consequence that every man in that world runs when they are deciding whether to escalate, told him something important. Killing Mike Tyson wasn't like killing Rich Porter, wasn't like killing Montana at a basketball game in D.C. Killing Mike Tyson would bring the full weight of every law enforcement agency in the country down on everyone connected to the murder. Mike Tyson was too famous to kill without consequence. That calculation, not conscience, not fear of Tyson specifically, but the cold arithmetic of what comes after, may be what saved Tyson's life that night. Or maybe something else stopped it. The human factor that exists even in men who have killed 14 people. The specific moment where the math suddenly feels insufficient and something that isn't math intervenes. Whatever it was, Alpo didn't shoot. Tyson walked away, and Alpo Martinez continued building the operation that would eventually consume him. But this story has one more thread. Darrell Baum, homicide, Homo, Montana's running partner, the man photographed beside Montana in Brooklyn in 1988, Mike Tyson's best friend from childhood. Homo became Tyson's bodyguard in the late 1990s. He was pulled back into that orbit by the specific gravity that connects men from the same neighborhood across decades, regardless of how different their lives have become. May 24, 2000, Curtis Jackson, the rapper who called himself 50 Cent, a name borrowed from the original 50 Cent Kelvin Martin, who had run with Montana's World in the 1980s, is shot 9 times in a South Jamaica, Queens parking lot. He survives. The streets said Homo pulled the trigger. The allegation was never proven in court, but it circulated with enough specificity and enough credibility that it became accepted knowledge in the world where these stories live. 3 weeks later, Homicide Baum is dead, murdered. Mike Tyson receives the news about the death of his best friend from childhood, the man who had been beside him since Brooklyn, who had become his bodyguard, who was the living connection to the world Tyson had grown up in, and something breaks. Cameras captured what happened next. Tyson's famous breakdown, the "I'm the best ever" rant. Tyson speaking with the raw emotional exposure of a man who has just lost something he cannot replace and does not know how to process it in any way that does not sound like screaming. That breakdown, that public unraveling of the most controlled and feared man in sports, was the direct result of Homo's death. Homo, who had run with Montana, who had known Alpo's World from the outside, whose photograph stood beside Montana's as a document of everything that Brooklyn lost when Alpo came to D.C. All of it connected, all of it tracing back through the same web of relationships and loyalties and betrayals that began when Alpo Martinez started moving cocaine through Harlem in the 1980s. Alberto Martinez was arrested in November 1991. 14 counts of murder, federal drug trafficking, conspiracy to commit murder. He cooperated. He became a government witness. He testified against the members of his own organization. He gave Wayne Perry, the man who had shot Montana in the head on Alpo's orders, to the federal government. Perry received 5 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Alpo received 35 years. He served his time at ADX Florence, the federal supermax in Colorado, designed for the most dangerous and most consequential prisoners in the entire federal system. He was released in 2015, 49 years old. He entered the Federal Witness Protection Program, and then, impossibly, inexplicably, he surfaced in Harlem, the neighborhood he had helped devastate, the streets where Rich Porter had been beloved, the city that had been counting the years since 1990. October 31st, 2021. Halloween night. Alpo Martinez is driving south on Frederick Douglass Boulevard in Harlem. Someone fires through the driver's side window of his red 2017 Dodge Ram 5 times. He tries to flee, throws what appears to be heroin out the window as he drives, crashes into multiple vehicles, finally stops at 147th Street. He dies before he reaches the hospital. Halloween in Harlem, 31 years after he shot Rich Porter near Orchard Beach. 30 years after he lured Montana to a basketball game in D.C. 30 years after he stood close enough to Mike Tyson to end the heavyweight champion's life and chose not to pull the trigger. The streets collected what was owed. They always do. Mino posted Montana's picture that night, smiling down. Happy Halloween. Jermaine Dupree posted. Same energy. Brooklyn exhaled. Mike Tyson survived the night that Alpo almost killed him. He went on to fight until 2005, to become one of the most complex and discussed figures in sports history. To carry the weight of everything that happened in and around his life, the convictions, the losses, the public breakdowns, with a specific rawness that only men who have been through the worst survive. But here is what the boxing world never fully understood about Mike Tyson. The most dangerous thing that ever threatened him wasn't in any ring. It was a cocaine kingpin from East Harlem who had already killed everyone around him, who killed Rich Porter, the Harlem King, who moved through Tyson's world, who killed Montana Benson, the Brooklyn Don, photographed beside Tyson in 1990, connected to his sister, connected to his closest friend, who stood close enough to Tyson himself, weapon in hand, reasons in mind, and in his own words, admitted what he was thinking. Alpo Martinez almost shot Mike Tyson. The story nobody tells. Now you know it.